All right, am I audible, guys? Super. So, well, thanks, guys, for being here, and thanks, everyone, for attending this session. Uh, I remember 2021, I used to go to these crypto conferences and talk about real-world assets, and people used to say, why? Like, there's so much cool stuff to do in crypto. Why bother with real-world assets, right? And come 2025, we actually recently saw an article from Larry Fink on tokenization, the big boss of BlackRock, that it could be as profound an impact on the world as the SWIFT system back in the 70s that revolutionized banking. So today we have an amazing panel which will talk about some of the important questions. And the first and foremost is, of course, this angst that people have about non-native stuff. Like crypto is all native. You got smart contracts which execute if things happen a certain way, and people get their money or whatever. RWA, not so much. So there is that. There's also angst about regulation. Like in crypto, we're used to saying we're not regulated, and that's a cool thing. Whereas in RWA, you are by definition regulated. So all of these paradoxes. So Takli yesterday talked about paradoxes leading to progress. And so today we'll talk about those paradoxes and see how we address these contradictions. So I've prepared a set of questions, guys. Parth, then if we start with you. So the Larry Fink article, in fact, is a good segue into my first question for you. Canton's built for enterprise and regulated financial assets, and that's an amazing thing to do right now. Now, as an institution focused on L1, how do you see RWAs, and where do they stack up in your priority order?
Thank you so much for the question, Swapnil. And pleasure to be here. The third edition of IBW that I'm attending. And I think RWA tokenization in itself has continued to gain more prominence. We at Canton are focused on RWA tokenization, and it's something a lot of people don't know about. It's built by this company called Digital Assets, which basically has been working on this for the last 10 years. It's backed by some of the biggest names in TradFi, including Citadel, Goldman Sachs, and the likes. So I try to think of myself as the bank chain of sorts. And the idea is to basically create the first privacy-preserving, permissionless chain. How this is going to work is that each of these big institutions can run private nodes that will talk to a global synchronizer. So you can basically share what is important with the counterparty. Let's say Goldman wants to share trade details with Bank of America. They don't want to give out all the details. They can share, let's say, amount, was it a success or not. So they can share data as well as assets in a privacy-preserving manner. We are finally, at the brink of all these concepts that have taken a decade to come to life. I think the greatest example that we have of RWAs already on chain are stablecoins. Dollar on chain is an RWA tokenization, and it has already found product market fit. I think rest of financial assets are going to follow. We already have more than 30 billion worth of US treasuries on chain. Particularly for India, I think I'm very excited about emerging market debt. I think debt on chain can be a huge unlock for some of the SMEs and the MSMEs in India. And yep, I think from a Canton Foundation perspective, that's going to be our area of focus. Land probably is the one that people associate with tokenization the most easily, but I think it's going to be the last sort of assets to get tokenized in a regulated way.
True. I mean, there is that whole topic about tokenize for data integrity and tokenize for transfer, right? And I'm guessing land will probably follow in the tokenize for integrity, but transfer will still be probably off-chain.
So land tokenization has been going on for a while, but there's always going to be a secondary market problem. Like who are the buyers? Like who wants those tokenized pieces
Who will sign
lands?
up 1 crore property transferring on just tokens?
So I think again, till the time there is more clarity on the regulatory piece, maybe new business model comes up for these tokenized land assets, I think we are still far off. But financial assets, it's already underway. US treasuries are a great example. I think other forms of debt, equity, tokenized equity, again, Robinhood has been going after it, and they're trying to launch a chain as well. So I think we're just at the cusp of the tokenization movement.
Got it. Thanks, Parth. Vipul, coming to you, Mugafi, amazing project. Mugafi, sorry, I keep always that phi and phase. So Mugafi, amazing project, and I like the fact that it's so community oriented, right? It's communities are thing in Web3. That's what we are so proud of always. And we always look at Web2 and say, look, you guys only have users. we have community. And so you guys have converted that into something so amazing where they can co-own the asset, not just randomly like and so on, right? So one of the most important questions that people often ask in the context of RW is, how do you enforce? How do you make sure that the buyers, the community believes, and rightly so, that it is real? You can't do that you can do it very easily in crypto native, but it's very hard in RW. So how do you guys solve for that?
One is obviously by the process, but largely our approach is not like platform first and IP second. We were always a IP first company and the platform came second, right? So our last IP, Kubera, which we released in June, did $35 million in collection.
Right.
So there are a lot of IPs which been there on chain, which been there out in the market already. So you can always go, and all these things are public. Like you can see the box office collections, you can see the satellite numbers, you can see how much it got sold for music rights. So all these are public number at this market. So today, when you go at Mugafi or you see Mugafi on the online, you can see all the movies we have done in the past. So that's one thing which brings that trust in the community. That we have, and even the first project that we brought on chain, it's a lot. It's a 6th movie of a 8-movie project. So you can always see the 5 movies which have done in the past, what all they have done. So those are the first criteria that whether you come on the platform, you basically get to see that these are the 5 IPs, 10 IPs platform have done. So they are not like first mover in the market. It's not a new IP. It's not an independent IP that you're bringing in.
Right.
And second, you obviously then try to build a right SPV. You try to have a right regulation behind it. You try to find the right method out of it, right? And then third, to bring this trust in the community, we also deliver a much larger APYs, because if you feel that it's a risk for you, we are giving you a 250% APY in some of the cases. Wow. Because it's the first timer people, these are people who are going to try it first time. So you have to have your risk rewarded for sure. And once you'll get used to it, once you start seeing it happening more often, then it becomes more useful and you can do a 30, 40, 50% APY, which we believe IP as an asset class would have been doing in the last 20 years.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, and I really particularly find it very interesting to co-own a movie, right? It's so cool. I'm glad
to see your name in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So, Siddharth, I mean, Finternet is doing some amazing work in one of the most important areas, that is financial assets and capital markets, right? And to Larry Fink's earlier quote that I took from The Economist, tokenization of financial assets could dramatically alter the very industry. We in India used to demats and all, but globally people still use paper. For what it's worth. And I've heard stories where the outstanding shares of a company, where the company's record were actually less than what all the people thought they owned, because there are 2-3 layers of custody, etc. in between. Now, this is also one of the most regulated domains. So how do you navigate these regulations? How do you see regulations evolving in general? And you are in Singapore, which is, I guess I thought was one of the best jurisdictions. But which, according to you, are the best jurisdiction for RW tokenization? So these 3 questions in that order.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts there. Finternet is essentially an architecture where we give individuals and businesses control over their digital identities, credentials, so it could be beyond just who you are, but where did you study, where did you work, other types of proofs, where do you live, so on and so forth, and assets. So digital identities, credentials, and assets. And assets could be across the entire spectrum. So it could be financial assets on one end that may be regulated, like money of different forms, central bank money, bank deposits, or private money, or stable coins. It could be regulated assets like securities. It could be assets that are registered. So when you think of land, it has a registrar behind it. Vehicles have a registrar. So registered assets, attested assets like gold, silver, energy resources, or user-controlled crypto assets. So if any of us think about the entire spectrum of assets that we have, it will typically fall into one or more of these 4 categories. Now, each of these have different types of governance attached to it. And so when you think about tokenizing it, there are really 2 parts to it, and you touched on that briefly. There's an element of verifiability, which means if I've tokenized that identity, I've tokenized that asset, can a counterparty, someone on the other end, verify, am I the rightful owner, holder, provenance, etc. And how do I do that in a universal manner? Anyone in any country can do that verification. That's one piece. The more important piece over and above that, although this itself is a big challenge in the financial system, is what we call transactability. And that basically means the ability to transfer,
Right.
right? And so if you have verifiability and transactability, you can take care of all the workflows that we imagine. And so therefore, when it comes to transactability is where it intersects with the regulations. Because let's say you talked about securities. Depending on the type of security or the class of shares, you know, we've got many founders on the panel, they will have certain voting rights assigned to founder level shares versus employee owned shares versus community or broader public owned shares on what you can and can't do. Or let's say land. In many parts, you would have rules on do you have to be a citizen to buy that land or not, so on and so forth. So for these kinds of workflows, governance becomes critical. And so that's where you start to see regulatory frameworks come in to say, okay, here's how you can accept a digital representation. It is legal to accept it. If something goes wrong, when you go to a court tomorrow, they won't ask you, give me the paper document, which is what happens today.
Yeah.
So a large part, you may create cryptographic proofs, but we won't see mass adoption because a lot of actors in the system will today say, no, no, give me the paper document. We saw this when we built the wallet infrastructure like DigiLocker. They would say, give me the physical document. And we were like, no, no, it's digitally signed, it's verified, it's blah, blah, blah. No, no, no. I need the physical document. Yes. It could be fraudulent, but it meets my processes.
Yes.
So really to wrap up, the way to think about the regulatory environment is for newer types of assets that you're tokenizing, you want to create a bridge where their governance rules can be embedded, but what blockchains allow you to do is embed it in code. Embed regulations in code, embed supervision in code, embed enforcement in code.
Understood.
Like, just want to add on that, like, totally agree with you. Like, basically, back in the day, JPM was trying to work on a project for creating trading bills on chain, but the law didn't allow for it. Like, even if you did it, you would still need, like, you know, paper documents. I think Singapore is probably the first country which has started recognizing digital bills of lading as, like, you know, legal documents. And again, regulation will sort of follow. But once that, like the example that I try to give is Genius Act. Like, since the Genius Act passed and stable coins are now, like, legal, we have seen, like, a doubling of the total number of circulation of, like, you know, stable coins. And the projections are 10x in the next 3 years. So from 300 billion to 3 trillion. So as and when regulations, like, you know, clear up, I think most of these tokenized financial assets will find their footing. Yeah.
Yeah, a very interesting example you sort of touched upon, the bill of lading, right? In Singapore, that became a very interesting use case. We saw that in action where they said the MAS enforced it. And there was apparently double borrowing against the same invoice. Apparently later on banks got angry that that practice stopped because their book was increasing. And so sometimes, you know, the weird vested interest can come in the way. But
teething issues.
you could say. But Vipul, what's your favorite jurisdiction? You chose India because the IP is here. But if you were to start or advise someone to start from scratch, for your line of work, what's the best jurisdiction in the world from a Web3 perspective?
From a regulation perspective,
Yes,
right?
regulation.
So again, India is still growing from a regulation perspective, so you can't set up those SPVs in India yet. So though we are investing a lot of projects in India, the SPVs are still based outside India.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and at the same time, we are also now touching because it's a global perspective. And see what crypto allows you to invest in the global movies or global IPs on day one. Like you don't have to keep moving out of the boundaries and thinking that you have to start scratch from somewhere else. And we had exposure to IPs in US, we had exposure to IPs in Korea. So when you go on a Mugafi launchpad, you get to see IPs from all over the world. And we've been able to do it because we found like 3-4 right jurisdictions for us where we can set up the SPVs based on where we have to invest.
Which are?
They're very
I mean, if it's
between
shareable.
between a UAE, Singapore, BVI, you have a lot of these people where regulations are much more easier for SPVs.
Right.
And it's more legal also to go ahead and start investing from a SPV perspective. So I think we have found the right jurisdiction for us. And based on IPs to IPs and the size of IPs, we decide where to move ahead the fund and where to move the fund from.
Got it. So, Parth, follow-up question on the regulation side, right? Bringing more Indian assets on chain, what are your thoughts on how to approach the regulators? Who are you approaching firstly, and what are you saying to them?
So I think there There can be two models to it. Like one is the Dubai or the UAE model, where like there's a separate regulator that's going to look
VARA.
after VARA, which basically Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, which looks after virtual assets.
Right.
The other is the approach, I think, which is going to be more likely case in India, where like RBI takes care of anything which is related to
Right.
payments or like stable coins and the likes, and SEBI takes care of like everything else that falls under commodities and securities. That's again this is all in motion. We don't know like what will be the timelines for rollouts, but I'm like optimistic that India India doesn't lead in regulation, but it follows.
Yeah.
And we already have like regulations in place in Europe, in the European Union with MiCA. Dubai and Singapore are becoming crypto hubs close to us, and they're seeing like a lot of talent move there. And I think the biggest trigger is going to be the market structure bill in the US, the Clarity Act. If we see that happening in Q1, I am pretty hopeful that by the end of next year, maybe India has a regulatory framework in place, and then we move forward from there. But again, it'll take years and years to sort of do this. Once finally we have the unlock, the floodgates will open. Stablecoins are just like a a starting point as an example of that. I think with market structure bill coming out in the US, you'll see more treasuries coming on chain, and these are trillion-dollar assets. So we don't really know how big the market can get.
Do you expect a rupee stablecoin anytime soon?
No comments there, but like I think there's definitely a lot of interest. There's a clear use case in terms of remittance. We are the largest inward remittance market in the world. We take more than 100 billion every year comes into the country, and 2 to 3% of that is lost because of the existing rails. So I think it's only a matter of time that people start seeing the value in an INR stablecoin. It won't get adoption like the US stablecoin. Even if you had like if you want to keep your money, would you keep in dollars or INR? You would keep it in the most stable currency. But I definitely see that there is a piece where it can fit in.
Perfect, perfect. So Siddharth, one question for you. Stable coins, right? They became like the proof of the pudding, if you will. And now people are, all RWA enthusiasts are pointing to stable coin, like all of us here, saying, look, that worked. And it's amazing use case. Like the other day I made a payment to somebody sitting in US, and it took me like 30 seconds and half a dollar to pay. And just 1 year ago, I had made payment to the same guy for the same services. Went through these 15 CA/CV forms and all that. It took 15 days and 15,000 rupees of CA costs to just prove that this guy was legit. Now, what is the next RWA according to you? One candidate. So not like just one thing if you have to pick. Say this would be the next RWA that we can point to after 2 years.
Yeah, so I think you really have to look at it on a continuum, which is we'll start to see financial assets tokenized a lot faster because a lot of them already exist in digitized formats out there. So there's already clarity of the rules, there is existing ecosystem participants, there's familiarity. So it's a much easier, whenever you're thinking about population scale transformation, you're sort of thinking about what's a good +1 that people can take, but collectively it leapfrogs, right? Stablecoins were an example of that. You didn't change the underlying currency, you just created a more transactable version of that dollar across the world. So I think financial assets would be there. And within that, I think you'll start to see particularly capital markets being the fastest movers because they also have an incentive.
Yeah.
The costs of the banking system hit them directly versus its profit pools to the banks. And then you'll start to see other types of financial assets come in, but things, he mentioned CIP. And so I think you'll start to see other types of assets. Again, you'll have to look at it jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So to your earlier question, I think the question to ask is really, if you're interested in tokenizing a certain asset, which jurisdiction today is most ready for it, right? So for example, real estate, Dubai is sort of doing a lot of forward-looking work. So you sort of want to, while eventually every asset will be tokenized across every country in the world, that's going to take 10 years out. So you want to find early jurisdictions that already have the legal and regulatory frameworks in place for different assets, and you can just do a marginal +1 on top and go live.
Understood. So Vipul, one difficult question for you. Often enough people say that tokenization is like multivitamin. It's good to have, but okay, you won't die if you don't take it, right? But your work, IP co-owning, I see as an example of something that is much harder to do in off-chain world, and blockchain and Web3 make it so much more efficient, but that's just my intuition. How do you see it? Like, what are some of the challenges that creators would have faced in a general sense, not necessarily Web3 or Web2, but just somebody trying to get people to co-own a movie? What were the challenges that they faced, and how did putting it on blockchain dramatically improve it? That would be like a great use case.
I can just add what laws do apply on IP? Like is it a security when you tokenize it
So it's actually considered security in a lot of places. So basically, there are multiple ways of looking at it. One is today there are only few asset class which are available for retail to invest in.
Exactly.
You look at stock market, maybe a real estate to some extent.
Gold.
Mutual funds are also a part of stock market. Commodities are there. But beyond that, there's no asset class which have been actually performing also well and have allowed a retail also allowed to invest it in. And that's where all the Ps and all are formed, right? That's what I say. Like the entire Ps are formed on the base of what all been taken away from retail.
Right.
And a lot of these, when you talk about RWA, when you talk about all these things, DeFi, this is basically bringing retail into the picture and taking a share away from that market and also increasing the pie, because the moment retail comes in, the growth multiplies. So that's the first way why this is more important to do and why this brings up a new set of opportunities. And I've also done a report where I found out all the top movies, like you remove the indie creators for once, but if you look at the IPs are giving you around 30 to 40% returns in total in last 30, 35 years, which is one of the most high performing market asset class. And still you as a retail does not have access to it. So that's one, but on the other side, when you flip the table and see how the creators are actually earning out of it, a lot of these creators who make these IPs and who create these stories does not have any access to the money which gonna come from the IPs, right? So usually I have a great idea, but I don't have the money, so I go to a studio, and the studio says that I'm gonna produce it, but I want to keep 100% of it. And you might get a 2% of the share or 1% of the share, so it's not fair for the creator also. Right. Then the moment you look at the IP, it's not a direct revenue. There are multiple sources of revenue attached to it. You have a box office collection coming in, you have a comic collections, you have a merchandise, you have a OTT, satellite, music and whatnot, so many kind of money coming from so many places. As a creator, it's impossible to track. But the moment you start putting this all on chain, so everyone who is attached to it have a clear sight that where and how much money is coming from. So I think it's more of a requirement to do it, to make the whole class a more transparent class and to allow more and more people to come in. And given that it's still 2.2 trillion at this point of time, almost 6 trillion market of entertainment is growing faster than ever. And, we talk about all this, that with AI coming in, productivity will increase. We all have a lot of free time to do. And all that free time gonna go in these things like entertainment, travel. So the markets are growing very fast. So it's gonna be one of the biggest asset class. And I don't see a reason why retail should not be the part of it.
Right.
I think, so there are angles from all the side, like wherever you want to look at, there's a need of IP as an asset class, I believe.
Got it.
I think totally resonate with that. Tokenization opens up new asset classes for retail. I think great examples, you can actually tokenize a ship or an aircraft carrier.
That's correct.
These are high yield generating assets that are only accessible to private equities or big funds. But if you're able to tokenize it, you can probably get retail to participate, and you can co-own a ship or co-own an
Democratize it.
Democratize it, yeah.
No, that's amazing. In fact, the same question to all three of you now. I will start with you, Parth. There is always, so far, all the innovations have been led by crypto native people. So initially we had blockchain, then people were doing Bitcoin mining and all that. They're all crypto native guys. DeFi came about, same bunch, basically then got into DeFi, some of them became degens, went on like that. So it was always led by, let's just call it most adventurous people within Web3. RWA is at a cusp where there are, rightly both of you mentioned, the fact that democratization of assets to retail is not necessarily only a Web3 thing. It should be to anyone. Anyone who doesn't even know how to own a digital wallet should also potentially have access to a share of a movie or a ship. But we don't know yet whether the comfort is there or not. So according to you, the next wave of adoption of RWAs, would it be led by Web3 native folks or Web2 folks who are Web3 curious but aren't yet native?
I think again, like we sort of live in this, bubble. Like Web3 in itself is not that big a space. Like in terms of, let's say, developer count, there are around 15,000 is a ballpark number for Indian Web3 devs, versus Indian Web2 devs would be in the millions.
Yeah.
So there's like, it's a very small sort of range, and I think adoption will be driven from Web2 first. And again, like people don't see this a lot, so banks and all have been working on this for a decade now. It's just that now the projects are finally coming to life. My example, Canton, the digital assets team, they've been working on this for 10 years, and they've built a new language to support this. So I think it's only a matter of time where it becomes more mainstream, and Web2 sort of starts adopting it.
I think one is obviously the layer between Web2 and Web3 will shrink over time. It was very hard for a Web2 native user to jump on a Web3 like 5 years before than it's today. That's one. And second, I, not just because I'm building IP, but I believe because it have a lot of fans around. And the moment you say that you're going to bring their favorite film on chain, a lot of new people, like for example, like 600 odd people out of 2,000 who usually backs in a day are new or a first time MetaMask user, right? So a lot of these new things will come because you are now bringing the fans what they love most. So I think IP could be the one biggest unlock where you force or you allow people to jump from a Web2 to Web3 and give them a reason to do so. So I think both things. One is the ease of shifting, and second is IP because it brings a lot of fans who are going to invite a lot of new people or a new wallets basically on Web3 now, as we see.
So, Siddharth, one side question to you additionally, besides this. Some people have speculated that you can actually get to a point where Web3 is just infrastructure, like blockchain is infrastructure and the users don't even know that it's there. Do you see that happening anytime soon, in addition to the first question, which is Web2 coming in or Web3 driving it? So, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, eventually, let's say, what are applications people in India use in their daily life? Let's say UPI, right? Users that are using PhonePe, Google Pay, Bheem, Bharat Pay, etc. on the merchant side as well. They're not thinking about, okay, it's on this database, and they're using this router, and there's this whole bunch of technical complexity. Right. So the real goal, if you want mass adoption, you want humanity to adopt it, you need to abstract that complexity away. And that's very critical, right? Because actually, as a user, I don't care, and there's no need for me to care. So that's one part of it. I think the second part where a lot of the complexity will get abstracted is when you bring AI agents into the picture, because then a lot of the workflow complexity that you have to deal with today, AI agents will take care of that for you. And that's how life should be. I should be able to clearly declare what my intent is and what I want to do, and the system should take care of that. I should not have to, spend my life going to the branch to get the paperwork, to submit it somewhere else, to contract a lawyer, to then get more paperwork, and spend a sizable part of your life doing that. So I think abstracting that complexity is very key as we move towards mass adoption. And how do you do that in a safe manner, right? So if I go back to UPI, every authentication is two-factor. Yeah. But it's one click. It's very seamless to the user. Because I just input my PIN, but that along with device binding takes care of it. So there are smart ways you can start to bring in convenience while taking care of security and abstracting the right levels of complexity. Because obviously different users, individuals, businesses will have different workflow requirements. But I think that's essentially the direction things are moving. And if you look at, for example, some of the perp platforms, etc., or you think of some of the, let's say, prediction markets, right? Users don't care what's underlying them, right? So I think that's really how I view it as well. You want to build out infrastructure such that the rest of the complexity is abstracted, and it works. And that's how it is for anything related to tech. I mean, imagine your smartphone. There's inordinate amounts of complexity in every functionality that's there.
Correct.
You don't know about that, right? So I think that's how we see it evolving. And to your other question that you had asked, I think what really excites us is massive democratization of ownership, right? Because if you can do that and you can democratize access and give billions of people agency, then they can really transform their own lives. They can choose what opportunities they want to access. they have a lot of choice in terms of who are the participants I go to. I'm not locked into the nearest branch that's near me, right? And you can create a lot new models as well. I think to your point of Web3 native versus Web2 native, I think that essentially gets blurred. It doesn't matter. It's what is the customer's problem and what does this new technology allowed me to do that I couldn't do on traditional systems? What are the things from traditional systems that allow me to do that I can't do here? You merge the best and you move forward.
Amazing. I guess that's pretty much time for us. So let's hope that in 2020, 2030 IBW, we have tokenized the IBW IP itself. And bunch of you actually own it partly ahead of time and partly for showing up. So yeah, with that, thank you gentlemen for this amazing session.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.